Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning, Deputy Sharp. May you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Deputy Sharp. I work in the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office.
Your first name, sir?
Alexander, sir.
Tell the jury about your education, military experience, and law enforcement experience.
Sure. Okay. So, education. I went to technical college for automotive. I graduated high school from the academy in Charlotte County. I have spent 4 years in the United States Marine Corps as an infantryman. I've also spent 3 years in the Fort Army National Guard as an infantryman as well. And I've worked for the Sheriff's Office in Charlotte County for about 2.5 years.
Now, at the Sheriff's Office in Charlotte County, what's your position and what are your responsibilities?
So I am currently a road patrol deputy assigned to District 1. Responsibilities are handling calls for service, traffic enforcement, and assisting other specialty units as needed.
Deputy, I want to direct your attention to November 13th of 2023. Did you respond to a house in Port Charlotte in your jurisdiction?
Yes, sir.
And what type of call was that you received?
I responded to a call for domestic violence between a mother and her son.
Do you recall the general neighborhood? Was it single-family houses?
Yes, sir. It was a neighborhood of single-family houses in a residential zone of Port Charlotte.
When you arrived, what did you do first?
Well, when I first arrived, they made contact with the supervisor deputy, Corporal Moore, who had gotten on scene prior to myself, and the deputy who was my trainer at the time. During the time that this happened, I was still in PTO training as a deputy.
And who was your field training officer?
My field training officer was Deputy First Class Jankowski.
And you mentioned Corporal Moore. Is that Corporal Joella Moore?
Yes, sir, it is.
Was she aware of the defendant and his mom?
In what regard, sir?
Like, did she give, without telling us anything she might have said, did she give you any background of the family dynamics or the parties?
No, sir. I was just aware that this was a domestic incident between a mother and her son. There was no other context given.
So you had no prior opinions about any of the parties involved, is that correct?
Correct, sir. I had never met either one of them before, nor did I know anything about them or their any other history.
What did you do next, Deputy?
The next thing that I did is I went to go and make contact, I believe, with the individual and his mother to try and start gathering information, and his grandmother, who was there as well.
And what was the defendant's demeanor like?
I would say calm and collected.
And when you made contact with him, were you inside the house or outside the house?
I believe I was outside the house when I made contact with him, as he had left the residence initially when we had gotten there, and then ended up coming back.
Now, did you have an opportunity to talk to him?
The defendant?
Correct.
Yes, I did speak with him.
Did you have an opportunity to speak to his mom, Cathy Griffith?
Yes, sir.
And what was her demeanor like?
She seemed nervous, quiet, scared. From what I could tell, just her whole demeanor, she was still kind of just processing what was going on. Definitely seemed teary-eyed, if you will.
When you say scared, did she appear to be scared of you or scared of what her son had just done to her?
She appeared to be scared of her son, as she had some injuries that were documented and photographed.
And what were those injuries that she suffered from her son?
She's had some redness and what appears to be the beginning of bruising and swelling on her stomach and abdomen area, as she had stated that he had kneed her in the stomach. And then she also had a small scrape with some dirt on it on her hand, as she said that he had taken his foot and kicked or stomped her hand.
Did she tell you why he did that to his own mom?
So, speaking with both the mother and the son, what we were able to gather was that she had told him that she was unhappy with his behavior at the time as a juvenile and was going to do some new parenting and wanted to take away his Xbox gaming system and his cell phone. And at the time, he did not like those consequences, so he grabbed his mom and threw her on the ground after kneeing her and then stepping on her hand when she went to get her cell phone.
Now, was there another lady there, the grandmother of the defendant and the mother of the victim?
Yes, sir. So the defendant's grandmother and the victim's mother was also present at the house as they were eating dinner together that night.
So they were having a family evening, the grandma, her daughter, and the victim's son, correct?
Correct. Those three individuals were the three people in the home that night.
And did you have an opportunity to speak to the grandma as well?
Yes, sir, I did.
And did her statement corroborate what her daughter was saying?
Yes, the grandmother's statement that she provided to myself and Deputy Jankowski was consistent with the statement given by the mother and the victim. Basically, they stated the exact same thing, that they were having dinner, and she told him that she was going to take some things away for disciplinary reasons, and pretty much gave the exact course of events the same.
Now, did you see any marks or bruises or injuries on the defendant?
On the defendant, we did not see any marks, injuries, or bruising on him at all.
Now, did EMS respond, or something like EMS, whether it was the fire department or EMS, respond to treat the mother?
Honestly, sir, I do not recall.
What happened? How was that case resolved that night? Who got arrested?
That night, Collin was placed under arrest for domestic violence against his mother for battery by strike.
And was he transported to the proper location and thereafter?
Yes, sir. He was transported to the Charlotte County Jail afterwards.
Was the mom or the grandmother arrested for anything?
No, the mother and the grandmother were not arrested.
Now, in addition to you and Deputy Jankowski, you mentioned Corporal Moore. Were there any additional law enforcement there you can recall?
I cannot recall.
Is it a fair statement that the three of you were doing multiple, multiple things, and were each doing your own part of the investigation, and not necessarily all three of you together at the same time?
Correct. We were all doing different things together. I was going and getting paperwork at different times to provide the victim, such as Marcy's Law paperwork, as well as victims' rights forms and things like that, while other deputies were doing other tasks on the scene at the same time.
Now, when you went to get that paperwork, you mentioned victims' rights and Marcy's Law. Did you or one of your fellow deputies provide that to the victim, Kathy Griffith?
Yes, sir. Yes.
And what does that mean? What type of paperwork is that when you say Marcy's Law and victim rights pamphlet?
So Marcy's Law is paperwork that advises victims of what their rights are in the state of Florida as a victim, so that way that they know that they have the right to go to different types of trials and hearings, and then different paperwork to let them know if they want to know when the person that was arrested for battering them or whatever crime may be is released from the jail and things of that nature.
Without, and then whether it's you or Deputy Jankowski or someone else, is that explained to the victim, Kathy Griffith, and certain questions asked and answers given?
Yes, sir.
If I may have a brief moment, Your Honor. When the victim, Miss Kathy, was sitting on the couch, how would you describe her demeanor?
I remember that I had asked her if I could get her an ice pack or anything like that, as she said that, the injuries that she had was sore. Offered to help if I could. I was trying to be, as compassionate as I could be in that type of a situation. She just was very kind of closed off, if you will, and scared. She had advised me at one point that she no longer wanted Collin living with her or her mother, as she was honestly afraid of him.
Deputy Sharp, I have no further questions.
Cross.
Deputy Sharp, in your direct testimony, you made it sound like Collin fled the scene of what happened at his mother's house. But that's not really true, is it? He was the one who called 911.
Okay.
You don't remember that?
I don't recall exactly who the caller was. I know that I responded to the scene, though, ma'am.
Were you aware, are you aware now, that Collin was actually on the phone with Corporal Rentis, one of your supervisors, when you arrived on scene?
Yes, he was on the phone with Corporal Rentis, and then also I recall that once he was placed into a patrol vehicle, he was also on the phone with Corporal Rentis as well, as they had previous interactions.
Right. So Collin is reaching out to describe to a law enforcement officer what just happened.
I don't know what his conversation with Corporal Rentis was, ma'am.
Did you interview Collin?
When you say interview, do you mean did I get a sworn statement from him?
Did you just ask him about what happened?
I had briefly talked to him, yes, initially.
And he told you that his mom punched him before he threw her off of him, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you and the other deputies who responded, it wasn't like you just went there, said, talk to you, talk to you, talk to you, everything matches, so we're arresting him. You were there for hours, right?
I don't recall exactly how long we were there, but it was not an in-and-out situation.
Right. And do you remember your supervisor on scene, Joella Moore, saying she never knows how to read Catherine Griffith?
I do not recall that statement.
But it's on body camera, right?
Okay.
Okay. Speaking of body camera footage, you had one on your person that night, correct?
Correct.
And it was running the whole time you were there?
Correct.
Have you reviewed it since you found out you were going to have to testify?
I reviewed it when I initially spoke with someone from the state's attorney's office.
Okay. So you interviewed Susan Detman, the grandmother, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you know that her statement did not exactly match what Kathy Griffith told you, right?
Their statements seem to coincide with each other and align.
That's what your opinion was, right?
That is basically what I wrote in my report, ma'am, yes.
Right. But what about what's on body camera footage?
That she had told me that they were having a conversation at the dinner table, and that Catherine told her son that she wanted to take away his Xbox and his cell phone so that she could only send and receive text messages and make phone calls, and that they had pretty much both decided that he wasn't going to go on their family vacation.
And then Susan also told you that as Kathy was reading him the riot act, that Collin stood up and said, let's do this.
Correct.
Right?
They both told me that.
Okay. But then Susan says she didn't see what happened next because she was going for her phone to call Corporal Rentis herself, right?
So Susan had pretty much told me that once he stood up and said, let's do this, that she stepped away to go and get her phone. And by the time she came back, they were on the floor. And the only thing that I have between that time period is both what Collin had told me he advised happened and then also what his mother had said.
Right, and Collin told you that his mother punched him in the face.
Correct. Collin had told me his mother had punched him in the face, but when we were on scene, I did not see any bruisings, marking, or swelling, or any indication that he had been struck in the face by any object.
It is possible to get punched and not have redness, swelling, bruising, correct?
I guess anything's possible, ma'am.
Right, you're not a doctor.
I am not, no.
So Susan did not tell you the same thing that Kathy did, because Kathy said, I never touched him. He's just being a brat because I took away his stuff, right?
Correct. The grandmother and mother had both pretty much told me, I'm sorry, ma'am, can you please rephrase the question?
My main point is that you made it sound like Kathy and Susan completely agreed on what happened, which would indicate to the jury that Susan supported what Kathy said about her not punching Collin. But Susan didn't tell you that, right?
Correct. Susan had told me that they initially got into an argument, and their statements were the same up until Collin got up and said, let's do this. At that point in time, the grandmother advised she was not present and did not see what happened from the time frame that he got up and said, let's do this, until she came back and they were already both on the floor.
Both on the floor. Now, Collin was quite forthcoming with you, right, when you talked to him, your interaction?
So I had talked to him initially, briefly, and then when I went to go and get a sworn statement from him, he advised that he wanted to speak
I'm going
to
to stop you right there. He was talking on the phone to Corporal Rentis the whole time he was sitting in the car, correct?
Correct. He was sitting in the back of the car.
And any time an officer walked up to him, they could capture his face and his voice and whatever he was saying on camera, right?
We had our body cameras on.
Right, so that's a yes?
Yes.
So Collin says his mom punched him and he defended himself by kneeing her and throwing her to the ground, right?
That is what he had stated, yes.
And that's on body cam.
Yes.
Okay, and then Kathy says, I never punched him, right?
Correct.
And Susan says, I don't know what happened. She may have punched him because I wasn't there when that happened.
Correct.
Okay. You all chose to believe Kathy over Collin, correct?
Based on the evidence that we had seen, to coincide with the two different stories and with what the grandmother had told us from the different points in time that she was there, it appeared that the mother and the grandmother had similar stories, or from what time periods they were both there together, that matched. And like I said, based on the physical evidence of injuries that the mother had and the son's lack thereof, that was where the evidence led us to go.
So your body cam would also show the alleged injuries to Kathy, right?
Yes.
And when you're, I know you were still in training, but I am sure you have learned, if not before then, that when there's a domestic incident and allegations from both sides about what may have happened, knowing the family history is important, correct?
The family dynamic between mother and
Right.
son? Yes.
And maybe prior acts of violence on either side? Is that important to know too?
Towards each other?
Yeah, or towards anybody.
So once we had placed Collin under arrest, we did check to see if he had any previous arrests for domestic violence or battery, and we did not find anything.
Right, but you found some for Kathy, right?
For domestic violence?
Mm-hmm.
As the victim, I did not go into her background and check to see her criminal history, as she was a victim in this case.
So you weren't aware that she has been arrested for domestic violence battery on another family member before?
No, I am not.
Would that have made a difference to you in how you approached this case?
No, ma'am, it would not.
And are you aware that...
Your Honor, I'm going to object to anything further about subject matter like that. It's irrelevant to what he's doing.
So are you aware that Kathy Griffith had been arrested before for stabbing her then husband?
No, I am not.
Are you aware that she was also alleged to have burned him with a terrarium heat lamp in that same incident?
No, I am not.
Are you aware that Kathy Griffith was on videotape shown to law enforcement and a DCF investigator driving her car and pinning her then husband to the house, between the car and the house, in front of her children?
I am not aware of that, no.
So you're not aware that the incident where she stabbed her then husband and burned him with a lamp was also in front of her children?
No, I'm not. As I had said earlier, I have no previous interaction with either one of those individuals or knowledge about their previous history.
Are you aware that Kathy Griffith had threatened to kill multiple members of her then ex-husband's girlfriend?
I am not aware of that, no.
Are you aware that she was actually contacted by law enforcement on her way to their home in Homestead?
No, I'm not.
And you're not aware that she was on an audio recording saying she was going to kill all three of them?
I'm not aware of that, no.
With her gun?
I'm not aware.
Are you aware that she has pulled a gun and threatened Collin in the past?
No, ma'am, I'm not.
And that happened in Charlotte County just 2 months before this?
I'm not aware of that incident, nor did I have any involvement in that case.
And are you aware that Kathy Griffith had pulled a gun and threatened to kill her mother's husband?
No, I'm not.
Would any of those prior instances, if you had known of them at the time, would they have made a difference in how you treated this case?
So I would personally say no, they would not have made a difference to me, because I would have gone into this case as it is a separate incident from things that happened previously. And in this case, you have to treat in different cases, or any case, you have to treat different. You can't take other instances into account into how you look into cases.
Collin was taken to jail that night, you said, right?
Yes.
And you claimed that, or you said that Kathy claimed she was afraid of him.
Yes, I did.
Are you aware that the very next morning she insisted on taking him home with her, despite Collin saying, I'd rather stay in jail than go home with my mom because I'm afraid of what she'll do to me?
I was not on that call, nor was I aware that that call even came out.
I don't have any other questions.
Redirect.
Deputy, are you aware that victims of domestic violence often want their abuser back in their lives?
Yes, that happens often. Usually with domestic violence, obviously it's going to be a family member, whether it's a spouse, child, or something like that. And people do have personal relationships, so after the fact, typically people want to try and reconcile issues and fix things.
Does that sometimes end up very badly for the victim being abused further?
It can, especially when it is situations where it's parents and children or husbands and wives. You'll see situations where you'll have multiple issues of domestic violence, but because it's a family member and someone that they love, it continues to happen and they stay with that person.
Does it also unfortunately end in family members murdering each other?
It can end in violence in that nature.
Now, the defense attorney was asking you a lot of the questions. Were you aware of things? Were you aware of things? Were you aware of things? Do you know if all or any of the information she was asking about is true or accurate, or what source it's from?
I have no idea of anything that she was asking me because I've had no other involvement with Collin or his mother. And as I had said, I treat that case as its own individual case, as it has no reference to other cases or instances that we've dealt with.
Now, the defense attorney was inquiring about you a lot about when she talked about Susan Detman, the grandmother, about the content of her statement. Mm-hmm. Is it accurate that Susan told you that her daughter was telling Collin that she would be implementing new parenting rules?
Yes, sir, that is accurate.
And the grandma told you that Collin would be having his Xbox gaming system and cell phone and other items taken away as a disciplinary action due to his behavior.
Yes, that is an accurate statement.
And these are things that Susan said the mother was saying to her son, correct?
Correct. These are things that the grandmother and both the mother had told me in their statements, that she was going to take items away due to his behavior for parenting.
And they were so fed up with the defendant that they told him that the Thanksgiving cruise vacation he would no longer be going on. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And at that time, according to the grandmother and Miss Kathy, the defendant's response was, Collin stood up and said, let's just do it.
Correct.
So did you take that to mean he was challenging his mom to a physical fight?
From both the statements that the grandmother and the mother had told me, yes, it sounded like he stood up and basically tried to show body language and intimidate his mother and say, okay, if you're going to try and take away my Xbox and my cell phone, then he wanted to have a physical interaction.
So because the mom was trying to discipline and parent her child, the defendant physically did what to his own mom?
So at that point, from basically what the mother had told me, is that he had kneed her in the stomach and thrown her to the ground, and when she went to go and get her cell phone, he stomped on her hand.
I have no further questions.
Thank you. Is the witness released?
He is, Your Honor.
Ms. Thornhill?
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Members of the jury, it's about 10:20. We'll take our mid-morning recess of 15 minutes.
All rise, please.